Well, hey, my friends, thanks for taking a moment to kind of tune in and listen to what this guy has to say for a few more minutes. I greatly appreciate that. I know that it's been a couple of weeks since we have produced any content for Waypoints Go, and I'm sure that some of you are wondering, well, what the heck's going on? You know, where are we going? What's the future look like? All those great things. And so I thought I'd jump on here for a couple of minutes and see if I can explain a few things. I actually want to begin talking about the future by talking about the past. I want to tell you a little bit about how Waypoints began and what our hope and our vision was for the community and how that has worked out over the years. So let me first take you all the way back to the 1900s, 1999 to be exact. I started seminary and started kind of working on my master's degree, and Waypoints really was not on the radar. I was a youth pastor, I was a men's ministry leader, technology, those sorts of things, and starting a church just wasn't even on my radar, my plan. And as I began going through seminary, I got to finish year one and a half. I really started feeling this feeling in my gut. This I don't want to use the word anxiety. Let me just say discontent. This kind of gut, something's not right. And that's one of the ways that God really has spoken to me over the years is this kind of gut discontent. This gut feeling of something's just not quite right. And as I began to kind of explore those feelings over the next few months and wrestling through that, I began to discover what was really eating at me was the Jesus I was studying in the scriptures was not the Jesus I was experiencing in church. It wasn't the same. What I was reading and what I was processing through in seminary, I was not experiencing in the local church. And that was just it really created this angst inside of me that just was like something's not right. And as I began to explore those feelings and began to wrestle through those, then the thought, the dream of Waypoints began to form in my heart and my mind. And I sat down and started writing what would a church look like that wouldn't give me this discontent? What would it look like to be a church that was a lot more like Acts chapter 2, a lot more that we see in the scriptures, a lot more, in my opinion, of what Jesus had in mind in the first place? What would this look like? And I began kind of walking that out and walking that through. And I graduated from seminary in 2001 and wasn't at a position, didn't have the doors open to actually start Waypoints. It was actually called The Edge in all of because I wanted us to be living on that edge, to be different, to be edgy, right? And so there wasn't any way for me to start that. Every door was closed. It was obvious. It wasn't time. Then we fast forward almost 2 years later of sitting in this kind of discontent, but telling God, okay, if this is where you need me to be, I'll do this. And so then in June of 2003, I finally got the doors open, which are huge, long stories that I've told over and over again over the years of just how God kind of created all of that. And so in June of 2003, I began to meet with a group of people that would then become our core leadership, who it is that would start this crazy thing that we call Waypoints. And through those summer months of talking and dreaming and wrestling through all of this, the one thing that we really came away with more than anything is we wanted to be different. We wanted to do things differently. There was enough people doing church the way church has always been done. And it was very clear and very obvious to us that that was not getting the job done. It's just not. And there were people out there that was not being reached with the gospel, people out there not being reached by Jesus. And so we said we got to do things differently, and that's where the round tables came about, and that's where Tuesday nights and then Friday nights and never meeting on a Sunday morning outside of Easter, that's where all of these things kind of came from. Is we wanted to do things differently. We wanted to really have what we called a raw Christianity, one that was just brutally honest, one that was completely open. That openness, I think, really created an incredible community over the years as we got started. But as we got started, and things started to move, and we started to see people come, all of a sudden we start going into places that we didn't even know, right? See, that's the wonderful thing about following God, is that you really actually don't know the outcome. And so when you start saying, well, it's got to be this or it's got to be that, then you've taken God out of the equation. Because when God shows up, he does things that most of us don't expect. And so when we started walking down this path, all of a sudden we started getting into the world of addiction, which was never part of our game plan. It wasn't something we wanted to do from the beginning. We started getting into the world of homelessness and, just so many other worlds that we had no personal experience in. It wasn't part of our life stories. It wasn't anything that we planned on, that we purposely went, hey, we're going to go this way. We just simply wanted to adjust our sails, which is why we have a boat as our motif, adjust our sails to the blowing of the wind of God. And it was so great when we took our hands off the wheel, what God did. And he did so many amazing things. And over those years in our old building, we'll talk about that for a moment. We were there from 2003 until the fall of 2012. We were in our old location on 21st Street, and it was amazing, absolutely amazing. God did things and set people free, and did just things that I was speechless. I'm still speechless about, not quite understanding all that God was doing. It was just so powerful, and we baptized literally hundreds of people, and just an amazing thing. And then we moved down to the Armory and started remodeling, following God there. It's very clear that that's exactly where God wanted us to be. He had to kick us out of our old building, and he opened up these doors, and that whole story is amazing, and just huge. And just to see God work through that, and to see him complete the building, and just crazy, crazy stories one after another, how God provided, and he did all of this and he did that. And then we had just this killer ministry at the Armory of just amazing things happening. And over the years, we've just seen so many powerful things happening, and they're all happening because we were willing to follow God, because we were willing to not regurgitate the status quo, not do what everybody else is doing, but to be completely different, and to just move in that direction. Our willingness to be uncomfortable, our willingness to risk, our willingness to seem foolish, right? Is just all part of what it takes to follow God. And so we did, and we followed God in all of these things, and it was absolutely amazing. I mean, over the years, we've seen hundreds of people set free from their addictions, hundreds of baptisms, as I said, hundreds of thousands. I mean, that people fed with a meal. I mean, I think when we finally came to realize that God was closing that door on our food ministry, we totaled up something like 100,000 meals served in 13 years. I mean, God just did amazing stuff. But catch what I just said, when God was closing that door. See, when you are also following God, not only do you not know where you're going, also are you in a situation where you could look very foolish, and you're doing things that are risky. You also have to have times when God goes, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. And to know that, just as Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, that there's a season for stuff. And so we knew that there was a season on the meals, and it was a hard decision and not very popular, and we lost some people over it, and it was just one of those things. It's like, hey, I got to follow God, not public opinion. And so we've had just all these amazing, amazing years of just doing incredible, incredible ministry. And then COVID hit, and we all know what 2020 was like. It was absolutely insane. And it really changed the course, not just of our church, but it changed the course of Christianity. And I think that we as a community handled COVID beautifully. Now, I will be honest, it was not easy for the leadership team at all, because, and it's still this way in our society, it's just never changed, unfortunately. But if you remember, every decision that someone would make, anyone would make, somebody was not going to be happy. And so for us, it was masks or no masks, vaccinations, no vaccinations. And if you remember, in the middle of that, all of a sudden we have Black Lives Matter happen on the scene. We have a very controversial election, very divisive election. We have all of these things happen in the midst of all of this. And it was just crazy. And our country has never come back to normal since. We've come to this new reality, this new normal. And George Barna, one of the guys who studies the church and studies current trends, he said a couple of things that were super interesting during the COVID. He said, first of all, that 1/3 of the church has left during this COVID season and will never be back. I think that's very true. I think that's accurate. Coming out of COVID, a year later, he said, if you're at 50% attendance to what you were before COVID, that you're doing well. And I think that's very true. And he also said that the average attending age of people would increase a decade. What he means by that is all the younger people left. So if you took a poll before COVID and came up with a median age, it would be X. Now add 10 years to that, and now the crowd that comes to church is now this. The church has aged, and that the church is no longer appealing to the younger generations and the vast majority of people. And you and I had a long conversation, a whole series about post-Christians. That's people who were raised in a Christian culture, but as they have grown, they've walked away from the church. They haven't necessarily walked away from Jesus, but they've walked away from the church because the church did not keep up with the times. The church became irrelevant. I'm not exactly sure where we got this concept. I mean, I know a little bit, but each of us are raised with this concept that church meets on a Sunday morning, and what you do is you sit in a pew and you stare at the bald spot of the guy sitting in front of you, and you listen to a talking head on stage. And if that's Christianity, the vast majority of Americans don't want anything to do with it. And then you add the fact of everything that we've experienced over these last 3 years of our culture becoming more and more divisive, and our culture really polarizing in politics and polarizing in topics and polarizing in every single way. And most Christians being on a side where the rest of America looks at them and goes, if that's Christianity, I don't want anything to do with it. And so as we came out of COVID and we get into 2022 and we begin moving, we as a church doing everything that we can to stay really on target, on focus, still doing what God called us to do. But I began to sense inside of me that same sort of angst, that same sort of discontentment in my soul that I experienced 20 some years before. The experience of what I was experiencing on a Friday night was not necessarily what God had in store for us. And I really began wrestling through all of that. And we as the elders had some tremendously long, long multi conversations where we'd meet every week for like 4 hours, and we would dream and we would talk and we would pray and we would just wrestle through things. And that's where this whole concept of Waypoints Go came from. It came from the fact of I do not want to perpetuate the problem with Christianity. I don't want to be part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. And when all of a sudden, and you've seen it if you were paying attention to it, all of a sudden in our post-COVID world, we stopped getting new people into church. We stopped baptizing people because people weren't coming to a new faith. These things that were so powerfully moving pre-COVID all began to stop. And that's all part of this thing, right? All part of this. And so out of these really difficult conversations, we began to decide and talk about launching Waypoints Go and say, well, let's empower our people to continue to do what Waypoints has always done, which is to be different and to do Waypoints Go and to take the gospel out and to do things, right? And we knew it was risky. We knew that some people would just say, nah, I'm not into that, and I'll go find another church, which is, a large percentage of our people went and did that. And I think more and more grow every day. see posts on Facebook about, oh, where are you going to church, and all that. And that's great. That's great. What that means to us is that's actually a sign of health. It's a sign that people are now taking ownership for their own spiritual journeys, and they are walking in what direction they feel right. And so as we began launching Waypoints Go and going through all of these things, multiple things started happening in the lives of the elders, uh, being pulled all sorts of different directions and different focuses and just all sorts of stuff. And as we started talking through this and working through this, we began to realize that as we started out with people really excited about it, that excitement really waned. And in that process, tithing stopped. Outside of the elders giving money, it absolutely just stopped outside of us. And so, with that, we had some realities we needed to face. And Justin found another full-time job, and Ryan took on another job with YFC, and all these things happened. And our goal, and the reason why I started One Eye Creation, the reason why I started all of that is because I believed I want to continue to coach and I want to continue to lead Waypoints as long as God says this is what we are supposed to be doing. And so I did everything I could to continue to pay my mortgage and take care of the things that my family needs from me and what I need for my future. And we continue to release all of this. And as we continued, it became less and less popular. It became more and more evident that people weren't necessarily grasping onto the vision and running with it, and that's completely okay. There's no guilt with that statement whatsoever. It's just the realities that people were really enjoying the content and saying, hey man, I enjoyed watching that, thank you. And I get little messages, wow, that was powerful. It's not on deaf ears, I heard that, that's great. But it's, and all that's wonderful, but at the same time it wasn't doing the vision that we really felt like God was calling us to do. And so as we continue to have discussions as elders, as we continue to wrestle through, we're like, okay, so what is the future? Did we hear God wrong, or what is God doing in the midst of all of this? And so conversations have come up like, so do we go ahead and start Friday nights up again? And I know there's somebody who's going, yes, absolutely, that's what you should do. And I have given the elders absolute permission. Absolutely, guys. If you think that's what God is doing, go for it. But Lindy and I will not be a part of that. Because the reality is, guys, is I don't believe that's the answer. I don't believe that. I have this angst inside of me that the American church, in the way that it is, it needs to die. And I've said this from the stage for years. It's not reaching people. It's not being used by the Spirit to connect with people, bring people to faith, that there is a disconnect between what we perceive as church and what Jesus had in mind with church. That there is a disconnect between our modern church and the rest of humanity. And that was never Jesus, and it was never the gospel. And I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution. I don't want to perpetuate something that is not working. And so, as we kind of wrestle through all of that, we as the elders are just processing through what does this mean for us? What do we want to do if the video content and what we were doing isn't going to be grasped and used for the greater good for the gospel? Then what's next? And to be honest, we haven't come to those conclusions yet. I think there is a real possibility that we embrace the fact that sometimes things are just for a season and things are just for, I believe that Waypoints was there for a time and for a reason, and we did amazing work for 18 years. It does not have to continue to go forever. Just like the current modern American church, it does not need to just keep going. If the horse is dead, get off it, stop riding it. That's probably a really horrible, morbid analogy, but we need to do things different in the name of Jesus, for Jesus, in order to reach people with Jesus. And I don't want to be a part of that. And so part of that may be the real reality that well, Waypoints will just say, okay, we're done. It's awesome. We did wonderful stuff. We still love each other, and all the elders, and we'll always be family. We'll always have all our experiences. Uh, but we're just not going to continue in that space. And I think that's a real reality, but we as the elders haven't come to that conclusion. We're still praying, we're still thinking. Um, but given the financial realities of each of us needing to do other stuff, it's been difficult for us to continue to film. And for those who have been following me personally on social media and stuff, you know that I have taken another full-time job. For those of you who don't know, my bachelor's degree is in technical theater, and I did theater professionally for years, and then I taught theater for 22 years, and I have been given the opportunity to be the tech director of the Candlelight Dinner Playhouse, which is a professional theater out on I-25. And I have like 8 different designers and workers that work for me, and I'm in charge of the entire creative aspect of each production. And it's something that I'm gifted at, that I have experience in, that I love to do. And so I've taken that job. I've been out there for 5 weeks. And so because of that, Lindy and I now have our finances where we can continue to live and survive and thrive and those sorts of things. And so as we face the future, I just want to be brutally honest with you guys. I'm not sure where we're going or what's going to happen. It's because we're all wrestling with, is God telling us that we're done, with each of us elders needing to move into different directions, with the finances just leaving us a lot of church earned debt that we have to figure out how to pay off, and with no tithes coming in, with just things in life. Is this God's way of talking to us? And I'll say the one thing, more than anything else, the angst that I felt that we needed to change something has dissipated inside of me, because I'm finding that I'm at peace with our season being done, that I'm at peace moving back into a world that I never truly left, but I always loved. I have found peace. Lindy has found peace as we have wrestled through this. She was extremely burnt out, and all of us have been burnt out by doing so many years of ministry. And so it has been a joy to have this respite. That doesn't mean that we don't love anybody, or that we're like, oh man, we're out of here because we're mad at you or anything like that. It's just that there's a season, there's a time for all of us. And so for us, Lindy and I, we have spent 24 years in ministry and of giving our hearts and our souls to people, and we don't regret a minute of it. And yet at the same time, it's good to kind of think about being done. Still loving Jesus, still loving people, still loving each other, but being okay with the fact that we're probably going to be done. I will continue to guide the elders into this conversation, continue to lead them, cheer them on, and if they want to pick things back up, more power to them. That's awesome, and I hope that they hire somebody to lead them and go for that. If they are in agreement with kind of where I'm at and say, you know what, I think this is just a season thing, and after 18 years of Waypoints, it's time for us to be done, then we will support that, and we'll be a part of that, and we'll celebrate that, because God has done some amazing stuff. All of our lives are changed, and they're changed because of what He has done through Waypoints. It just doesn't need to continue unless God's in the middle of it. And so if God's not in the middle of it, I don't want anything to do with it. And honestly, none of us should. And so I just wanted to give you that update, and we'll continue to, once we make some decisions and stuff, we will make sure to give you some information as well. All right. So please know that I love you, and that Lindy loves you, and we adore you, and we have been so proud to be a part of this Waypoints family for all of these years, and that doesn't change. even if I feel like God is calling us elsewhere. All right. So I love y'all. We'll give you another update soon. All right. Take care. God bless.